Thank you, everybody, for downloading this episode of the Nerd Ball Podcast. Here I am, as I always been saying, in my basement. Although there is a new development, not necessarily that I'm getting out of my basement, but something I've been saying for a while with doing videos or doing the podcast at Perrysburg CrossFit or Fort Meigs CrossFit. That I think I am going to take classes, and I'm getting my wife involved, and I'm getting Mateo involved. So I think we're finally going to do it. I guess nothing's official until I actually come back and say that I'm super sore and I've actually done it. But it's in the works. And hopefully within the next week or two, we start that and see how it goes. I'm pretty excited about it. I see them all the time when I would record there. So we'll see what happens. We'll see. Hopefully I don't fall apart as I'm doing this. But I appreciate you all for always downloading this podcast, listening to this podcast. Maybe not listening, but like I always say, just at least download the thing. That helps the podcast out. So this episode was great. It was with a comedian that I've met a while ago, and I see from time to time. The nerd out section, that again, it continues to be one of my favorite sections. That's what this podcast is going to turn into, just one giant nerd out session, because that's usually what happens on these podcasts. So we talk a lot about that. But it was a great episode. Please like, review, share, subscribe to anything and all things. Check out the YouTube page. That we're slowly climbing our subscribers there. I told my daughter we had 121, and she went, "Yay!" So I got a yay from a 9-year-old. So I'm pretty excited about that. So keep following, keep subscribing to that too, please. And keep listening. If you need to reach out to the nerdballpodcast@gmail.com. All our social medias, just search for the Nerdball Podcast. But every week we're here, twice a week, putting these episodes out. Everything's going well, so I'm really excited about it. The last two episodes last week were pretty good. It was on last Monday was the Perrysburg tight ends, so that was fun. Just talked to a bunch of football players, and then Ian Townsend last Thursday. It was a great episode, and I'm sure I'll have him back on to tell us more stories. He has a bunch of stories to tell, so he'll come back on soon. So, again, thanks as always. Here's today's episode.
Hi, this is Pat Seivert, and this is the Nerd Ball Podcast.
This is the Nerd Ball Podcast with Lorenzo Melcher.
All right, Pat, thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I've seen you around. I used to do comedy quite a bit for a while. I haven't done it. I got 2 kids and involved in a bunch of coaching and stuff. I do it here and there still, but that's where we met. You're super hilarious, man. I always talk about you when I talk about you to my wife. I go, remember the guy with the purge deck guy? And she's like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
So again, I appreciate you coming on here. The first question I always ask people is, what do you nerd out about? What is something you're really into? Something that kind of gets you away from the daily grind, something that you either been doing for a while, maybe it's a more recent thing, but just something that you can just really focus on to kind of take your energy and just put it into one thing.
I mean, I've been comic books since I was like 8 years old. I had an older cousin who read them. So he kind of got me started. I think he lent me a couple issues of like Spider-Man and various stuff. So I had to go and read my own after that. So now I'm 42 and I've been reading them since then.
Yeah. So I've never been big into comic books. My son, he doesn't read comic books, but he reads books about all the Marvel superheroes and that kind of stuff. But I know usually when people get into them, they like one more than the other, if it's DC or Marvel, or maybe it's just one arc of certain characters. Is there something like you really hone in on, or is it just the whole thing in general?
I was definitely more Marvel than DC. And maybe that's just what I started with was Marvel. I think my cousin, he was only reading Marvel primarily, so that's kind of what I gravitated more to. As I got more into it and got older, it would be more I'd follow different writers and artists that I liked. So if they were writing something for DC, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to read that because I like that writer. I'd say now I kind of go towards like what stories are more interesting to me because comics are expensive now.
Yeah.
It's a hobby that really doesn't make sense. It breaks the bank. So it's like, okay, I want something that's gonna like something that I'm gonna really, really want to follow if I'm gonna spend all this money on. Um, so right now it's like pretty much just the X-Men titles are really grabbing me right now.
It's interesting when you talk about writers because again, I don't read comic books, but I would imagine that you can tell that, like, let's say you didn't know who wrote certain things. Could you
Mhm.
tell by styles, like maybe not necessarily like pinpoint exactly a person, but kind of can it narrow it down to certain people just based on like how they write?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're a kid, I don't know that you pay attention to
Mm-hmm.
like the because it like the first page usually says who's writing, and who's drawing it. I think when I was young, I didn't know what that meant. I'd be, like skip over all that. You're reading it for the characters,
Yeah.
so you could probably pick up an issue, and maybe the next one was written by a whole new person, and you just didn't notice that. You'd maybe be like, oh, it felt a little different, but you didn't know why.
Mm-hmm.
um Definitely, like, some people maybe have more of a maybe some people are writing more darker material than
Uh,
others. And then sometimes maybe it's like the art style is people different, like you can definitely tell the art,
yeah.
the art wise is people have different styles of drawing. That's maybe the one you'll see it differently. Yeah.
Yeah, whenever I would pick up comic books, that's what would interest me because I wasn't big into that stuff. My dad collected comic books when he was younger, but that's just something like we didn't do together. Him and my older brother did a little bit, but not a
Mhm.
lot. But when I would look at comic books, I liked looking at the art. Sometimes I wouldn't even read them. I would just look at the drawings and check
Yeah.
everything out and not even pay attention to what's happening. I just like looking at the pictures.
Yep. I mean, I think because that's like, you can, some people, like, I think it does help kids learn how to read. Like
Sure.
they do have, like, you can read, you can appreciate the pictures, and then you will pick up different vocabulary words if you're, I think it helped me, but
Okay.
yeah.
I know for my son, my son for school, he has to read 20 minutes a night. And that's what it's been doing. Now he's in sixth grade. He doesn't do it as like for school. We still make him
Mhm.
read, but I think that's part of it too. Like he's a really good reader, but he's been reading since he was younger. His grandparents would read to him all the time, and so he picked it up pretty quick. But I think just like with anything, if he likes it or if you like it, then if there is some difficult part of it, you're going to try to get through it because you like reading and you like these comic books. So I think
Yeah.
you're right. It does help in a way.
Yeah. I mean, I think so many people, they say like there's a big chunk of people that don't, like, after high school they just don't read
Yeah.
anymore. It's just like, well, I don't have to read anymore. So like, when, like, they'll be like, when was the last time you read a book for pleasure? And they're like, I just don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, but you're right. Some people it just does not exist. It's like, hey, if,
Yep.
if no one's making me read it, I don't do it.
Yep.
So when all the Marvel movies started coming out, I would imagine you were like like super excited about it. But
Yeah.
as with most people, when they read a book that gets turned into a movie, they kind of tear it apart. Was there anything that you did with that, or were you able just to watch it and enjoy it?
I mean, I think as time has gone on, it's like I can kind of appreciate them more as their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I like, you know, sometimes I'll watch like some movie that's adapting a story I really liked, and I'll be like, oh, I wish maybe they didn't do it as well as they didn't touch on the things I liked about the comics as much.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll be like, well, that's all right though, because I still like the comics, so
Yeah.
I can always read those if I wanted to, like.
Are you one that goes on opening night when a new Marvel movie opens, or do you?
Um, I I don't know. Like, I was, when I was younger, I would go to, like, I think usually it used to be the only option to see stuff like that, like, or like a new Star Wars movie was to go at midnight, and
Yeah.
that was kind of cool. I remember like in my 20s, it was kind of neat to go like something like that at midnight. Well, now everything's like Thursday at 7 p.m. or whatever. So, and which is neat.
Yeah.
But if I have like a show or something going on, I don't like plan. I don't change plans to do it.
Yeah.
But I have like a group of friends that if they're going, I'll try to coordinate and see it with them. Um, I'll try to go like the first weekend, I guess, for
Mhm.
them. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite comic book and a favorite movie?
Um, for like the Marvel movies, I like I think I like Captain America: The Winter Soldier.
Okay.
I think that's a really good one. I think that's just a good movie.
All right.
I think like the directors of that, like the Russo brothers, they went on to do like the Infinity War and
Mhm.
Endgame. So I think that's I think they've made some of the best ones that Marvel's put out. So
Oh,
yeah.
nice. Yeah.
Captain America's up there is one of my characters I like a lot. I'm always going to be a Spider-Man fan.
Okay.
I like Peter Parker more than Miles Morales, but I like Miles too. Yeah.
My son got into him way more than I did or my wife did. I remember when he was young, he when they first came out, like he was, I mean, he wasn't born before when they first came out. So when he got older, we started watching them and we would split it. So we'd put him to bed, and then we'd sneak my son back out of bed, and we'd watch half of a movie on Friday,
Oh,
and then we'd watch the other half on Saturday.
yeah.
And he really liked it. He at first he probably liked it because he got to get out of bed when his little sister was still sleeping.
Oh,
Um, but now they both like it. Now we'll watch them. We've gone to the theater to see a few, but we usually just see them in our house. But he's gotten into a lot of that stuff. Like he likes Marvel stuff. He's watched all the Star Wars movies by himself. Like I don't want to watch them. They just don't interest me. But he's watched them all by himself. He tells me about them and all this stuff. And it's funny how all that stuff like I'm into sports because my dad was into sports somewhat, but he
mm,
also liked Star Wars and I just didn't. But it's funny how it works out where he's got into all that stuff even though I wasn't into it at all. But something
yeah.
drew him in and he really liked it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like my dad wasn't ever super into that kind of stuff, but he was he didn't discourage me from liking
Mm-hmm.
it either. So I think you're doing the right thing there. Let your son have those interests, and
Yeah.
long as I think when a parent's like, well, I don't want them to get into that, so I'm going to like really push them not to, then they'll just get into it more.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So
For
if
sure.
you're worried about your kid not liking something, liking something too much, like your best bet is probably to just like let them let them have it, and
Yeah.
then they'll probably just like they'll figure that balance out on their own. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But my dad always thought it was weird that as an adult I play video games as much as I do, but then he has to think, he goes, but you grew up with it. That's your
Yeah.
life. Like you grew up with it. And it's the same thing. Like I can't get mad at my son for playing video games when I'm playing video games too. So
Well,
like
yeah, I think people think of video games as like it's a kid thing, but it's
yeah.
like your generation started playing them and then
Mm-hmm.
didn't stop. And then
Yep.
they've gotten so much better over time. So it's like, yeah, the ones that like kids today play are like, movies. And so
Mm-hmm.
of course we started playing them when they were, these kind of shitty, of course we're gonna still want to play them because they're awesome now, like
Yeah. It only got better. Why would we stop now?
yeah, yeah. Of course, I want to play the new Zelda because it's awesome. Like,
Are you play video games quite a bit still?
I didn't play for a while. Like, I think, like, I remember I had like the original
Mm-hmm.
Nintendo, had the Sega Genesis, had those when I was like in elementary and middle school. When like the N64 came out, when I was in high school, I played that for a while.
Yeah.
I was never like super good at it. I think video games kind of got like a little more complicated, so they're kind of harder to master.
Yeah.
Um, then like in college, I played like fighting games like in the dorms. Had like, hey, everybody's getting together. We're gonna play Soul Calibur or Halo, so I'd play that.
Yeah.
Um, then I just took some time off, but then like I had like friends got Nintendo Switch when that came out. So
Mm-hmm.
I remember playing like Mario Kart with some people. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
this is fun. I got that, and then I got like way into like all the gold after that. Yeah.
um, do you, when you I want to go back to comic books real quick.
Yeah.
When you purchase these comic books, you have everyone you've purchased, or do you sell some back, or do you get rid of them?
I
Or
still have them all.
yeah,
Yeah, I think I said I had a goal this year to start going through and like see if there's anything that I would want to like sell or like offer up. Like, hey, if you have kids who want comics, like I'll
oh
let
yeah,
you go through and first come, let you have first dibs for here's things that I'm not going to keep because
mm.
there's some things that I would keep, but then there's other stuff that I would get it out of my house. Like I don't need it anymore. But I haven't done it yet, so maybe that's more next year. But yeah.
My dad has those big, giant, long
Oh
boxes that
yeah.
you store
I have
them
a
in.
bunch of long boxes.
Yeah.
I had a lot of those short boxes too because
Mm.
the long boxes will break your back if you move them. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I moved at the end of 2019 and I was like, I don't want to have to move these again.
That's when you figured out. Maybe that's when you're like, yeah, we can probably get rid of some of these.
Yeah.
um. What was I gonna say about comic books? I don't remember. So you've been collecting all these comic books and reading all these, and did you ever like reread comic books?
Yeah. I mean, not as much as I should for as many as I have, but there'd be times I'd be like, I want to reread that whole thing. So sometimes, if I wanted to reread something from a long time ago, it'd be hard to go back and find it, with all the boxes I have.
Yeah.
Um, but like Marvel and DC, I think they have a lot of their stuff online through like Marvel Unlimited, and I think DC has something similar. They
Mhm.
have a lot of their stuff online on like these apps. You can pay like it's a pretty cheap. I think it's like Marvel's is like $60 for a whole year, and
Hmm.
the issues are just digital online. So like there was a whole storyline I wanted to reread, and they put it in the order that they suggest you to read it
Oh,
in. So that was pretty cool.
that's always helpful. I remember when I started the
Yep.
Marvel movies, I had to ask a friend, like, all right, how do I watch these? Am I watching these in
Yeah,
release
yep.
order, or what am I doing here?
And the only thing that made it like that experience was like I like reading the issues. I like holding the issues in my hand. So reading it on a
Mm,
computer screen wasn't as like I guess as wasn't as satisfying. If I had a tablet, maybe it would have been better, but
yeah.
I don't have one, so I had to read it on like a laptop screen. So I guess if I'm gonna seriously go back and like reread things on the app, I'll probably invest in a tablet. But I could see for like wanting to go on a deep dive, like I'm gonna reread all this, all these
Mm.
comics. Maybe I'll invest in something like that. But yeah.
Do you find yourself not buying as much because you can go on there and just read whatever anything?
The only reason I don't, I haven't cut, I have cut back on some things because I'm trying to like save money and, comics can be like each individual issue now is like $4,
Okay.
sometimes $5. Um, and you can get them on this app or you can buy like, collected editions that'll be like, 6 issues at a time. It's a little bit cheaper.
Okay.
Um, but the issue with the app, it's like 6 months behind. So if you're like, oh, I want to read what's going on right now, you're just going to be always a little bit behind if you wait. That's the only downside. But
Okay. All right.
so
Yeah,
like for
because
certain things I want to be up to date. Other things, if I feel like I can wait, I'll wait. Yeah.
some of those things too are like let's say like a TV show where you don't start it right at the beginning, but you're like 3 years later, but you can then binge all those episodes.
Yeah.
So maybe something
Yeah.
similar to that. We're like, yeah, this storyline's okay, and I can wait on it, and then you could read a bunch in a row.
There's some writers I think that work better. Like I remember reading some things as they were coming out, and each issue would be like that was really quick, and I felt like not a lot happened. But then you would reread the whole thing, be like, okay, that was pretty good. If I
Yeah.
waited and read all 6 issues at once, it would
Mm.
have been a better story. Like yeah,
So yeah, maybe just their style lends itself to
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah,
Maybe they can put that on the cover of the first one, like, hey, why don't you wait a little bit and
yeah. 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 Perfect for binging.
Yeah, there you go. Did you live in Michigan?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Lansing.
Have you always lived in Michigan? Did you grow up there?
I was born in Illinois, but moved to Michigan when I was like 3, so most of my life. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Do you like living up there? Do you
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
live in
I
Michigan?
enjoy it.
Yeah. I mean I don't go up there very often. I do always see because you guys have um seemingly I've never been to one, but really well run shows that you do. And then there I know in Lansing there is that where Max is?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So it looks like a cool like fun cool like comedy scene up there that everyone's involved in, and the shows look really cool. How'd you get involved in that Max comedy night?
I mean, I like started doing comedy in 2012, and I wanted to do it for a couple of years, and just like took me it took me like a year and a half of like thinking about doing it before I like went and watched a couple shows at like the Connections Comedy Club. We used to have one in Lansing. I know
Oh,
you're from Toledo. They had one
yeah.
there too.
Yep.
I don't know if you ever performed at that one.
No, my friend did in high school actually because that open
Okay.
mic night. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so I had performed at like the Lansing Connections, and I'd done that a couple times. And one of the other comics like, "Oh, we're starting a new thing at Max," and I was like, "Oh yeah, I've heard about that place, but I had never been there." And I think my all I had heard of it was like there was like an article in the paper, one of the papers we had in Lansing, that there was like this band was going to play a concert there, and they were like this kind of like punk rock band, but they were kind of like they had like some controversial lyrics, like people
Oh,
were like protesting them playing there.
yeah.
So I was like, oh, that place. They're gonna have a comedy show there. And so I went there. I think I went to like the second one that they had done, like had their new weekly show, and I was like, oh, this is, and it was a good time, and and I
Mhm.
was like, this is cool. And they were like, gonna book, like they pre-booked it, but I was like, well, I'll just show up every week because maybe someone will drop and I'll get time because I'm local. I'll just like show up,
Yeah.
Yeah, like I'll just hang out. That's the best way to like, get time.
Yeah.
I just ended up getting on a bunch of times because people would like, not show up because it was a new show, and a lot of times it wasn't crowd to start with. So just I
Hmm.
think just by like being there and being normal and just like not bothering people, and
Yeah.
yeah, just kind of hung out, and then like the show started like I think so that was 2012. Like 2013 they were like, hey, like some of the people who were involved then like kind of moved on from doing comedy regularly, so then it was
Hmm.
like Dan Curry and Mark Roebuck, who are my two good friends, started taking over the show, and they were like, we want to make sure there's always performers. We want to make sure we can count on people, a set lineup. So they wanted me and Robert Jenkins, who
Hmm.
you probably remember from
Yeah.
when we were doing comedy, and a guy named Jason Carlin, who doesn't do it that often anymore. Um, and so the three of us are going to be like regulars every week. Plus, they book like 4 or 5 more
Hmm.
different people every week. So that's yeah, that way they knew there would always be like the 5 regulars plus
Hmm.
extra people every week to make sure that it would have like we could have a show.
Yeah.
Then going from there, we just like started doing the show. We focused on like let's just make sure we're there every week doing it, and then word will spread, and it started kind of building slowly over time. And I'd say by like 2015 we kind of like had the word of mouth had grown and people were coming out, and kind of just took off from there. And
Is it hard to perform every week? Because I feel like it's a lot of pressure to try to be like,
um
all right, I gotta make sure to have new stuff here.
yeah, I think it's like I think they at Max they kind of want to they like the regulars know you, so they're willing to like give you the benefit of the doubt.
Mm-hmm.
They want like they can like they will like they'll be like, okay, you know, we've heard this before, but are you going to try something? Are you going to try like a new take on it? Are you going to try to see, you know, change something, maybe like see where we can go with it? And if you try something new, maybe they'll like see, you know, maybe they'll try to give you some give you some laughs to make, you know, so hey, yeah, you're working on it, like, you know,
They'll give you a little
credit for
leash,
that.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. um yeah, I always like, I think Robert and I kind of talked about it, and he'd say like Robert's philosophy was like, I'll do it like 3 or 4 times and then I try to like do something else so that they don't get sick of like, you know, hey, we've heard this before. We've heard
Yeah.
this too many times. Um, Sometimes it'll be like, hey, I have this new thing. I've been working on it, and I feel like you know, I don't have it's not that new yet. It's not that new now. So they probably have heard it enough. So
Mm,
maybe, and I don't have anything else new. So let's do something that's, you know, a couple months old that I haven't done in a while. And, you know, that might work, you know.
yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of how I try to do that.
Okay. All right. So you've been
Um,
doing comedy since 2012, you said.
yeah.
What initially got you into that? Like, when did you do it?
I mean, I always liked it. Like, well, I mean, I think, I mean, it's hard to say. Like, you know, I always, you know, you know, funny things were funny.
Yeah. Okay.
When did I first watch like stand up was probably like middle school when we got cable, and I'd like watch Comedy Central like yeah, after school, and I was like, oh, the stand up, that's kind of funny, you know.
I used
Then
to record. I used to record VHS tapes off. Like, I remember. I'm sure I have VHS tapes of like Dane Cook on
oh
like
yeah,
a
yeah.
Comedy Central or something.
Yeah, I just remember like watching like Dr. Katz and not quite realizing that that was just like stand-up comedians doing their bits. I was just like,
Yeah.
oh, it's just a cartoon, and like these people are saying funny things, and like now it's like, oh, that was just like a stand-up bit, you know, like the yeah. um so that kind of stuff. And then like listening to like stand-up comedy CDs around like high school, and, you know, getting into it then. I always wanted to try it. um then like I kind of like I did like a couple open mic things in college but didn't stick with it. Then it was like 2010, like late 2009. I remember like some people at work were listening to comedy podcasts.
Yeah.
I like was started listening to that, and like everybody would, you know, anytime like comedians were on another podcast, they'd be like, oh, I have a podcast. And so I'm like, oh, I listened to that, start listening to like more
Yeah.
comedy podcasts. And they'd all talk about like, so when I started doing comedy, I just started going to open mics and I'd do
Mm,
this. And I'd be like, oh, okay, so you go to an open mic and you work on 5 minutes and you do this. And so I kind of knew like what to do when you start. And like that, so I was like, my mind was like, I feel like I know kind of what to do now. Like, like, so maybe I had like a leg up on like people who, you know, maybe want to do it, but they don't know where to start, you know,
yeah.
maybe. Yeah.
I know when I first started doing it, it was so scary to me because it was like starting a new job. It's because
Yeah.
I knew nobody like at all. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm gonna do this thing, and I don't know if people tell me I did a good job. I don't know who these people are or if they're just saying that or what. Like, I had
Yeah.
nothing to like, nobody to talk to about it. But it changed really quick. Like, you become friends pretty quick with these people because I think comics realize like, all right, what he or she is doing is difficult, and I know what they're doing, so we can
Yeah.
talk about it and understand each other.
Well, it's like I remember like when I expressed that I wanted to do it, and then like I told like, you know, friends knew I wanted to do it,
Mm-hmm.
like family knew, and then there was like an article about the open mic at night at Connections Comedy Club, which is where I went up for the first time like a couple weeks before I did it, and like so my mom was like, we saved this from the paper, you know, might want to read it. So like I read about it, and like it was featured like comedians that were there performing like the first night I did it. So it was like when I met them, I was like, oh yeah, I read about you in the paper. Like like I kind of like was weird. Like I knew who some of them were already. Like yeah.
Yeah, I remember one of the first people I met was Keith Bergman.
Oh yeah.
We because there was used to be an open mic at the Funny Bone,
Yep.
and that's when I first went up and I remember. I mean, everyone says this, every person who does comedy says this, but man, I still have recordings from when I would do like everything, and I listened
Mhm.
to my first stuff. I'm like, this is terrible, but I think it's supposed to be. And the point of that is,
Yeah.
I think the hardest part is, especially your first couple of times, is just going up there and
Yeah.
understanding how you do things. Like for me, I have to write every word, every a, like I have to write
Mhm.
everything out by hand. And then I go over it and memorize it. And then as I'm on stage, new things happen, or I get tagged here or there just based on how I'm feeling or what I think about up there. But those first few times is like when you figure out how, at least for me, is when I figured out how I do comedy, I guess. Like what
Yeah.
how did you, or how are you, like when you're writing, or do you write on stage is what they say,
Yeah.
or what's your preparation?
I feel like I kind of I mean, I have ideas and I write out like I don't know that I don't feel like I write out like word for word what I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like think about it how I want to say it, and then when it comes to writing it out, I just kind of write out like the bullet points and try to like recreate it from there.
Okay.
Um and then just kind of like say it, and if it doesn't get a huge laugh, and I'm like, but I think the idea is good, then it's like, all right, do I need to like reverse how I'm saying it? Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'm coming about it wrong. Maybe, like, sometimes it's like maybe this is the punchline. Maybe I'm starting
Yeah.
with the best part and like trying to, or maybe I'm, adding something that doesn't need to be there, like cut something out to get, I don't know. Yeah. Like
I used to
yeah,
do a lot.
I think the
Yeah.
days of me like sitting down and like writing things out, unless it's um like like I'm like trying to like tell a story, yeah, like I don't know, I've been working on a joke lately about like over the summer I had like bats get in my house.
Yeah.
Like this is a real thing. Like I had like a couple nights where I was woken up by bats getting in my house. Um and like so each time I had to like deal with them,
Yeah.
and like I ended up killing them with a broom, which is like that's like terrifying, like to deal with them. And then like people are mad because like I didn't just like let them out, and like
Yeah.
and like the health department, and like people are like, you got to get those bats tested because you might have been bit, you might have rabies, and like so it's all this stuff. So like in that case, I'm trying to like write out like all the important details and try to like think of like the jokes I want to tell in the story, because it's not, I don't want to just like tell the story like, and that's crazy, right? Like that's not
Yeah.
it's like I want to tell the story, but I also want to have like jokes, like solid laugh lines in the middle of it too, yeah.
But I like your thought, because you don't know when you come up with a joke or a story. I know for me, sometimes I have a thought of like, this is how I want to end it. And as I'm doing jokes and putting one here and putting one here, and then after a while, I'm like, uh, for me, it's like, oh man, no, this right here in the middle is how I should end it, and then I got to build it backwards. Like, all right, how do I get to that
Yeah.
end then? But there was a lot of times when I was mowing at work, and I'm just talking to myself because like I'm going through my set, like trying to figure it out as I'm like mowing, and people are like looking at me like, what is wrong with that guy? Just I'm like, my wife can hear me from the kitchen if I'm in the backyard. She goes, "Were you going over your comedy set?" I'm like, "Yeah, I did. I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure it out right now."
Yep.
So it is fun though to it's basically a puzzle, and you're just trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So you've been are you still involved with Max now?
Yeah. I mean, like the everything shut down in 2020,
Yeah.
COVID, and then like the bar was closed, and it sounded like it was kind of in doubt, what the status was about it reopening. Like everything was kind of reopening and they weren't yet.
Mm.
Um we were hearing that they were like doing this big remodel, and it sounded like, what was it going to reopen as? Because there was talk of like it was going to be totally different. Was going to be like kind of a sports bar now. What we didn't know. And we'd heard that they were like taking out the stage. So so we were kind of like, oh, maybe it's not going to be a venue anymore.
Yeah.
So we just like, and it was like, I think it was like the end of 2021 or something. We were just like, hey, I don't think the show is coming back. Like, thanks for everything. Like, that's it,
Yeah.
and then like there was like some kind of like drama a little bit. I don't drama's not the right word, but like some people like it was like a popular show. So like some people never got a chance to do it because we'd always get like a lot of people wanting to
Yeah.
perform, and we had to like some people never got the chance because it was like we'd get so many requests and we could only book so many, and it'd be like, well, we had 80 requests, we had 50 spots,
Yeah.
so not everybody got on. And that's just how it was. And some people were like, well, I never got on, so fuck that. Like,
Jeez.
so yeah, that wasn't the most fun.
I'm sure that's a hard like having to pick people knowing like, well, they're gonna be pissed, but whatever. This is what we're doing. That's gotta be a hard job too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so like, that, and then like we were starting to see like looked like the outside of the bar started like they painted it and they were putting like a new sign up, so they're like, oh, maybe it's reopening, all right. And then like and Dan Curry, Dan Curry, he quit comedy. He wanted to focus on other things, which
Yeah.
he's still a good friend. I was like, yeah, I wish you well.
Yeah.
Like he's like, hey, I just got a call from the owner of Max, and he wants to do the show. He's like, I'm not coming back, but if you guys want to, you have my blessing. So we've been that was like October of last year,
Okay.
and said we could start coming back in November, and we've been back since then.
And it's you and Robert and who else?
It's changed a little bit since we came back, but right now it's me, Robert, Jackie Marpa, and Nick Lydorf.
Okay. All right. And that's every Monday you guys do that?
Yep.
And for the hopefully for the foreseeable future, you guys keep doing it.
Yeah.
It seems like I said, just based on the amount of people that you said like request to be on the show, it seems like it's a pretty hot ticket that people really like to really enjoy.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, in between the time the show went away and looked like it maybe wasn't coming back, I started helping out with another open mic in Lansing area on Tuesdays. So because my card was getting so full, like a day job running, now helping run two shows, doing comedy myself, I decided to take a step away from booking Max. So
Okay.
I still help host once a month and perform there, but I don't do any of the booking now. So that's on Robert, Jackie, and Nick. They
Okay.
do that, but I still help them out, still part of the show. But yeah, I run a mic at Beggar's Banquet in East Lansing, which is like I think this is actually their 50th year being a restaurant. They're like a somewhat popular, like they're like a college restaurant bar, but they have like a good like local following. They're pretty nice people.
All right, nice. You mentioned your day job a couple times. What do you do during the day?
It's basically like supply chain kind of stuff.
Oh, okay. All right. Is that what you went to school for? That kind of stuff?
No,
No.
no, actually, just ended up there.
Yeah. All right. Well, a lot of people. That's how a lot of
Yeah,
people are, man. It's just whatever there is, or whatever pays the bills, whatever you like. I mean,
yeah.
I work for the Toledo Metro Parks, and we had she doesn't work there anymore, but we had a seasonal that wanted to work there, and she quit nursing to just be a seasonal worker. Just
Okay, yeah.
because that's just what she wanted to do at that time. It's
Probably like, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. She just wanted to change it up a little bit. Um, I did you get the headline somewhere? I thought I saw
Yeah,
you on your Facebook
I
page.
I headlined the Ann Arbor Comedy Showcase a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. How'd that go?
That was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's like that club means a lot to me. When I first like wanted to get back into doing, when I was looking into doing comedy again, I was just
Mhm.
like, let's look up like comedy clubs in Michigan because I knew there was one in Lansing. I knew we had connections. But I just like looked up other ones just to see like what else there was
Yeah.
and saw like Ann Arbor Comedy Showcase. Um, and I saw like they had a couple headliners coming through that I recognized. So I went and watched a show and I was like, oh, I like this place. I like kind of the vibe of it. Uh, so when I wanted to start doing comedy, I tried to get on their open mic. Because like they had like you called the week before to put
Mm,
your name in the hat, whatever. And I never got drawn the first couple times I tried. So I just ended up doing my first set ever at Connections in Lansing, which I'm glad glad to start there. It was a
yeah.
good club while we had it.
Hmm.
RIP. But like the second place I performed was Ann Arbor, and like I feel like that was like I remember the first night I performed there, I met Roger, who was like the old manager of that club, and he was like a fixture of that of that place. And he talked to me and just always seemed to like me for some reason and always gave me opportunities. And so like when he asked me like the end of last year about feature he's like he mentioned headlining me like right before COVID. He was like probably like 2021, Pat. And I was like, okay. And then, COVID happened. I think that like messed everything up.
Yeah.
So when things came back, he was like, oh, well, he was like, probably pushed everything back. So I was like, okay. So yeah, I guess it pushed it back to like 2023. But yeah, it was great. It turned out really well. And I knew I could do it because like I won like a couple years ago, like 2018, I was featuring at the Holly Hotel,
Hmm.
which is like a lot of people kind of like worked their way up to like featuring there. Like I don't know if did you ever get a chance to perform there when you were
I
doing
did not. I did not, but I've heard about that from a lot of the comics. Yeah.
yeah. So I was there and like um the headliner the first night like he got sick with like some bad strain of the flu that was going around that winter.
Hmm.
He got like so sick he couldn't make it. uh so like I remember like looking on Facebook and seeing like the booker was like, I need a headliner tonight, like emergency. And I was just like, well, I'm like leaving work to drive out there. And I was like, well, hopefully they find somebody. Like, I don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Drive there and like I'm just like getting ready, hoping, and they're just like, well, we think they might have found someone. Just like go up there and start performing, and we'll let you know.
Oh
Uh,
God. So you don't even know how much time you're supposed to do.
yeah, like we'll just stretch and we'll tell you, and like so like I think I had just done like 30 minutes, at the like Home Slice in Toledo.
Okay. Yeah.
Like that mic that
Yeah. Yeah. I've been there. Yep.
yeah. I think I had just like done 30 minutes like a couple weeks before. So like and I so I'd probably had 30 minutes before, but had never like pushed myself to get there before.
Yeah.
So I was just like, all right, I just did like almost everything I knew I had and like looked at, and then I was like, and like at some point I asked like, I was just like, all right, I'm doing as much as I can,
Yeah.
I'm like, I was like talking to the audience, like, are we having a good time? Like all that. And I was like, I asked and if there was an update, and like one of the servers just kind of like just do like a couple more, like do a little bit more. I don't think we have anybody else, and like they were like, you're doing great. And like So I did like 10 more minutes or whatever it felt
Yeah.
like, wrapped it up, and like then I like looked at my phone and I had done like 50 minutes. So I was
Oh
like,
wow.
I was like, wow, all right. So it's like, I guess I knew I had like the time to do 45 minutes, but is it all good,
Yeah. Yeah.
like, like, because that's not how you want to find out you have that much time, like just trying to remember stuff from like your first open mics ever. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's
Um,
not the ideal situation.
yeah. So, but yeah, having like a year to prepare, and then like, was going up there at the club where, I had like Nick Earl and Caitlin Chekarowski were on the lineup, were the host and the feature, and they did good. So the crowd was already like, warmed up every show. I did my 45 minutes, and it was always, pretty easy, and yeah, it was great.
That's awesome, man. That's cool. That's such a cool story, and like I said, not the ideal way to find all that out, but
Yeah.
now you knew, like this is, I can do this, and I'm sure that was a huge weight off your shoulder to know,
Yeah.
like, this is something I can do. One more thing before I let you go, I also saw that you get to open for Gary Goldman on November 11th.
Yeah.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah. I've actually opened for him a few times. Like he came through Ann Arbor Comedy Showcase. So, like he used to do perform there like once a year.
Okay.
Um, so like I think in 2019, yeah, 2019 he was there. So I was one of his openers, and he was getting he was doing the material that became the Great Depression. So I was on that show.
Okay.
Um, and then like a week later he was at the Magic Bag in Ferndale. So he asked me to like do 10 minutes on that show. And like that was fun. I like, and like I hung out with him a little bit
Yeah.
there. That was cool. Like then it was last year, it was like 2022. I just got an email, unexpectedly asking if I wanted to open for him at the Ann Arbor Theater. Um, or the Michigan Theater in Ann Arbor. So
Okay.
that was a pretty big deal. Did that, and now I'm with them at Royal Oak Music Theater when he's on his like book tour comedy show thing. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's pretty cool, and like, to have people like want you to be on their
yeah,
show is a cool thing too. Yeah.
yeah. I don't know if I'm like now his like go-to person for Michigan, but at least it shows that he does know who I am and like thinks
Yeah.
about having me back. Like
Yeah.
yeah, I'll take it.
That's cool. Yeah, that's cool, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Pat, and best of luck to you in the future. Hopefully everything works out for you. Again,
Thank
you
you.
every time I see you, man, I really enjoy your comedy, and some of those bits just like stick with you, and that's for me. I know, like, when I can remember, or I know when someone remembers something I said, like, oh yeah, regardless if it's somebody I'm coaching, or if it's somebody, doing stand-up comedy, like,
Yeah.
then like I'm doing something right, or it was funny, or it was like meaningful or whatever. And that's, I like, whenever I just associate you with Purge Deck all the time. I know it's probably like old stuff for you now,
Well,
but
I mean,
I love
I
that. I
that's
love that.
awesome. Like I think that's definitely a huge compliment to get. Like I think that's definitely a bit that I don't see myself like taking out of my set. Like like
Yeah.
especially doing something like where nobody knows who I am.
Yeah.
Like I don't do it at like open mics or something. Well, I mean, I guess if it was like if I was traveling in a state I'd never been to and they
Yeah.
were like, yeah, 7 minutes or whatever, maybe I would do it. But I'm not gonna do it at like open mics around here where they know it. But yeah,
I had Sam Rager on a show that I produced. Was it last month or a couple months ago? And like, as she was headlining, as she was going, I was like, oh, I hope she does this, or I hope she does that. And she's like
oh
doing
yeah,
some of these ones that I just love that she does. The one that I'm sure you've seen it, but it ends in a period piece. I'm like,
oh
yes,
yeah, yeah,
that's one of
yeah,
my favorite ones. And she did it.
yeah,
It was,
yeah.
it was so exciting. Like, I really enjoyed that. But again, Pat, I appreciate you coming on here. And every time we see each other, you're such a nice guy. And I knew asking you that you'd want to do this. So thanks again, man.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, hopefully I'll see you soon. I haven't been to Toledo since everything reopened, so hopefully.
Oh yeah, I we could talk about it after we're done here, but I have an opportunity for you possibly if you're available. So, but we'll talk when we're done here. So
okay.
All right, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again to my guest, Pat Seivert, for coming on the podcast. It was great to hear all about his comic book nerdom and Marvel movies and some little bit of video games in there too. Then how he started his comedy career and where he's at, where he's been, what he's done. It was pretty cool. And hopefully I can get him on a show here sometime in the next year. We'll get him out here and you all can come listen to him. He's so funny. He's one of my favorites out there. He does such a good job, and hopefully, like I said, hopefully we can get him out here so you guys can see how funny he is in person. So thanks again to Pat. Thanks to all of you for always downloading and listening to the podcast, watching the podcast on YouTube. Search the Nerdball Podcast. I have a Twitch also that I use from time to time, so just search the Nerdball Podcast on Twitch. Twitter's or X is the Nerdball Pod, and everything else social media is search the Nerdball Podcast. We are everywhere all the time. We don't necessarily use, or I don't necessarily use the social media like I should, but it's there, and there's some stuff posted from time to time. So it's just a hard thing to do. We're so busy doing everything. So even this one, I had to record on a weeknight because we have games and stuff now on Sundays when I usually record. So that's just where we're at right now. 3-year anniversary is coming up in a few weeks, and my 200th episode is coming up in a few weeks. So trying to figure out something special to do for that. I don't know what it's going to entail. If you have any ideas, hit me up at the nerdballpodcast@gmail.com, or most of you are my friends, so you can probably just text or call me. So we'll see if you have any ideas. Until then, as always, thanks to Real JP Multimedia, Cuttlefish Graphics, Perrysburg Junior High STEM Lab, and Big Daddy Graphics for always helping out the podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.